Hello, hello, what is up? What is good? It is time to talk about movies, about my favorite 15 movies of 2025, a year in which I saw many, many movies indeed, new stuff and old stuff. I think it might actually be my new high score for most movies I've seen in one year. It was our busiest TIFF season, the Toronto International Film Festival. We had a new high score for that. Plus, a friend of mine that's really into movies moved back to Toronto around the start of the year, which expanded, just the opportunities, the pairings, the range of stuff that I was going out to see. So it was really tough to pare this down to a top 15. If you're interested in stuff that didn't make the cut, I've written reviews of everything I watch on Letterboxd, where my username is also Kitsta. So go ahead, check that out. But I did try to make these slides in this discussion not totally redundant with that. So even if you are a Letterboxd follower, I hope that you'll still get something out of it. I'm really excited to talk about all these, so I think we'll just plunge right ahead with our number 15 pick. That's going to be Richard Linklater's Nouvelle Vague. This is a delightful romp that dramatizes the filming of Godard's Breathless with this yearbook-style cameo buffet. I say it's yearbook-style because every time they introduce a new character who are all, real directors and actors and stuff operating in France at the time of the onset of the New Wave, they do this little Wes Anderson-y kind of diegetic breaking shot where they just frame them like a yearbook photo and it shows you in a caption who it is. There's dozens of these across the movie. It's a true buffet of everyone in the French New Wave, which is a technique that exhausts me in some contexts, i.e. in Marvel or other kind of cinematic universe crossover type things, cameo spam. Probably the way it's used is most similar to the Nolan movie Oppenheimer, where frankly it kind of pissed me off because I just kept going, it's not how they would act. That's just really not Einstein's vibe. But here it's just so fleeting and so irreverent. There's no real sense of the gravity of seeing some of these guys, and you're meant to kind of be in awe of their mystique or whatever. It just is sort of tossed out there, just quick enough that you recognize who they're meant to be and you remember their name, and it conjures up their own career. It really charmed me, and it really drew me in as a way to kind of structure this movie, waiting to see who else you'll recognize that'll show up. And when they showed Agnes Varda and Jacques Demy, I blended their names in my horrible French pronunciations. I had a lovely feeling of it's my friends. What are they up to? What are their lives like during this time period? Where do they go after this brief scene they appear in? It's a very straightforward, very low conflict, just this mild comedy of errors and ennui where you're not going to be rolling around in the aisles laughing. You're not going to be stressed out on the edge of your seat. It's just kind of a pleasant time watching Godard just trapeze around. It's surprisingly artless. There's none of the real challenges that mark Godard's very experimental work. What they do offer up in kind of homage to the way he shot kind of feels quaint now. These are things that now he's really established as fundamental to art cinema, and you don't really think twice about. And yet I think all of this is to the film's benefit, because it is hagiography. It is very much kind of worshipping at the altar of Godard and this whole movement, and it kind of feels like Linklater wishing that he could be back there in that artistic moment and living out this little bit of fantasy. But there's no pretense to it. There's no weightiness to it that beats you over the head with how genius everything is. There's no tedium that results from that sort of thing. There's no kind of belabored dramatized, make or break moment. There's no feeling of tension, whether or not he'll pull it off. It just sort of goes through all the motions. And I think this tone is really established by this very wonderful trick that's at the core of the entire movie. It's like a little joke where the whole time you're seeing Godard just kind of like farting around. He's filming things somewhat randomly. He never really has a plan. The actors are frustrated. The producers are losing their minds. The rest of his crew is a little bit befuddled, but, just happy to get a paycheck. They're just wandering around Paris, just like shooting shit at random. And we're not expected to kind of be, like, ooh, Godard. What genius lurks behind his madness? This inspiring method of filming. I'm moved. No. If anything, I think we're meant to empathize with the detractors, the skeptics and all the befuddled people that have kind of been stuck on this possibly sinking ship with him. And yet, the movie assumes the entire time that you know what's happening here, that he's shooting Breathless, and that's widely considered one of, like, the greatest filmic achievements in the entire Western canon, that this was a landmark, groundbreaking, brilliant film. And at the very end, there's just a little title card that summarizes this, the legacy of Breathless and its appearance on all these best of lists and stuff. And by that point, it really does kind of remind you that you really do kind of get suckered into this world's understanding of Godard. And all the way up until, the credits, you're kind of like losing faith in him yourself. But then, this is this perfect little punchline to remind you what it is you actually witnessed. I've seen this movie get kind of mixed reviews. A lot of people are fairly meh on it. And the biggest criticism I've seen is people saying, what is the point of this movie? Because, Breathless, it already exists. And this doesn't really teach you anything new about how it got made. But in my mind, I think that not that I'm like elevating this to be on the same tier as Breathless, but I think Linklater is very aware that people might say something like this, and in doing so, he is executing his own little Godard-esque prank where the divisiveness and befuddlement you have is no different than audiences back in the day witnessing Godard go about making this movie. So I think those people just kind of got trolled. All right, let's move right along to our number 14 pick. This is The Last Viking, directed by Anders Thomas Jensen, a Danish film. We saw two Mads Mikkelsen movies at TIFF. First, an English language role where he is your kind of grizzled, badass veteran in a very silly, child-friendly comedy called Dust Bunny. Kind of comedy horror vibes. I'd highly recommend checking it out. It's very fun. And then this movie in Danish, where he's a man with severe DID, dissociative identity disorder, and he is convinced that he is in fact John Lennon of the Beatles. Are there any stars besides Mads that are split this much demographically, where the type of movie they make for two different audiences is so surreally different? I'm genuinely curious. I'm sure there's maybe a couple other examples out there, but yeah, it's funny because it's so distinctly him the whole time. Like, nobody else quite looks like that or sounds like that, no matter what language he's in. But this is just a completely manic, madcap comedy that lunges in every direction you can imagine and then some. The structure kind of feels like a crime thriller, because the main through line of the movie is Mads Mikkelsen's brother robbed a bank. He was arrested, but right before the cops nab him, he manages to stash the money away and tell Mads Mikkelsen where the money is hidden. Then we cut to years and years and years later. The brother is out of prison, he's come to Mads to try to get the location of the money and recover it, being trailed by this psycho that knows he's out of prison and knows that he must know where this money is and is trying to, browbeat and torture everyone on his way to get that money back. But then finding the money relies on the John Lennon brother. And because he's so convinced he's in this persona of John Lennon from the Beatles wouldn't know where this money is hidden. Why the hell would John Lennon, know where this money is hidden? So then he has to kind of like both buy into this fantasy and seek a way to break his brother out of it, becoming this really deranged comedy of errors. But then understanding that disorder and trying to extract the location of this money from it requires him to break through all of this family trauma that, through its accumulation over the years, caused him to have this dissociative break. Which, and then we see is this tangled web of twist upon twist upon twist, flashbacks that reveal more each time of, oh, you think that he's mostly worked up about this, but then they kind of find some catharsis and resolution there, but then in the flashback revealing the source of that trauma, there's just a little plot hook to another piece of trauma. It's really relentless, and often I find that kind of construction a little bit tedious, because I feel like if you just keep undercutting your own reveals, eventually it's tough for the audience to really get invested anymore, right? Like, oh, okay, well, this is our third answer to why he's so traumatized. I bet it's actually the fourth, but here, they never really expect you to get totally committed to that emotional framing, because it is just so wacky at the same time. You're never too far from like a massive comedic set piece. And even when it took big swings for sentimentality and catharsis and, appreciation and all these lovely things that I think, again, on paper I would have found kind of tedious, maybe unnecessary, I was happy about them. I kind of cheered for them. I wouldn't say I was like emotionally overwhelmed or anything, but I felt that it was well earned simply through how deranged everything was. That because they had gone to such lengths, because they had held so little back in terms of the comedy, I felt they've deserved some respectful clapping around the big character moments at the end. This is what Danish films are like. I don't know if I've ever seen any other Danish movies. Is this what they're cooking over there? Because it's like, this isn't, the enormity of world cinema delights me. This is not a genre combination that we have unlocked in North America, I think. We've got some stuff that I would say is close to this, but just the specific blend of ingredients I don't think I've ever encountered before. And it's not like it's experimental, some intellectual art film, something like that. It's just this very strange, very dark crowd pleaser. It's something that I think could be like a blockbuster star vehicle for some of their local A-listers, some of their crossover stars. It's very nice to see that something that I think does have mass audience appeal in Denmark isn't infantilized, is nowhere near as infantilizing as all of the major blockbusters, or at least the vast majority of our major blockbusters are. So, God bless that. All right. Now let's move along to number 13. It's Bob Odenkirk with A Cup of Joe. This is Normal, directed by one of the more storied directors on this list, perhaps, Ben Wheatley, who's directed a lot of bizarre B-movie sludge, but put together a really fun romp with this. This was our finale for TIFF this year, and I only managed one quad movie day for this entirety of TIFF. The quad is pretty tough, and this was the finale of that day. And man, at that moment of exhaustion and mania and just the very strange type of triumph where all you've done is just show up and watch like 20 movies over a 10-day period. I think 25 movies over a 10-day period. But you really do feel like you've accomplished something. You do genuinely feel quite proud of yourself after all that. Sitting down and understanding what it was we were getting into, understanding that it's just this extremely goofy action comedy thriller. It hit like a truck. Like an isekai truck, taking me to just somewhere great, somewhere where I was like, oh, this is gonna be an easy watch. This is gonna be an easy 90 minutes or whatever. It's a very straightforward movie that on paper I don't think really sounds like all that much. Bob Odenkirk plays this very depressed, very adrift sheriff for hire who just kind of hops into different police precincts and runs them for a little bit as an interim thing between filling the vacancy permanently. He ends up in Normal, Minnesota, which is a very humdrum town. Obviously, all eyes are on Minnesota right now with current events as they spell fascist state troopers. That might be a good plotline for Normal too, actually, running ICE out of town. But here it's presented as, very humdrum, very uneventful. The sort of place that might not even show up on most maps. But it's one that harbors a dark and dangerous secret that is just incidentally revealed to us through all these little clues and events before finally spilling open. And then once that secret is exposed, things escalate extremely rapidly and unilaterally into a madcap orgy of violence, gunplay, explosions, fisticuffs. It escalates in so many different ways simultaneously. With my favorite moment right in the middle. I don't want to spoil too much, but there's this very brief, very futile repose where they work in a very clever title reinterpretation of Bob Odenkirk saying, okay, this is going to be the new normal now, which lasts like 5 minutes before things devolve right back into even more intense chaos. So this sounds like a, perfect 3 to 3.5 star movie that you would watch with your dad, right? So, like, what took it over the top for me? What was it that really, really clicked with me on this? I think the kind of, like, pre-reveal setup before anything crazy happens really scratched a good itch for me. The Fargo itch, this feeling of quiet desperation in the frostbitten Midwest. You really spend quite a lot of time like zooming in on all this extremely petty small town beef. And to me it was like the whole movie could have been that. You didn't need a twist. You didn't need the violence necessarily. I think I would have loved just watching maybe a semi-sappy flick about Bob Odenkirk showing up in this kind of miserable town, and in fact being the most miserable one of all, but slowly squashing beefs and bringing things together and turning over a new page in his life as well. But the violence itself was fantastic. It had sort of a Sakamoto Days appeal, where so much of it is just improv and surprises and ad hoc weaponry, all taking advantage of these very kind of humdrum locations throughout the town. What a treat that is. So well choreographed, so inventive, so dynamic. And Bob Odenkirk, man, Big Bob. So many little turns in his performance here. He gets to do a lot of different stuff. The depressed shtick, warm-hearted stuff. He's sardonic and sarcastic and miserable, but then he kind of livens up at times, and I just always love to see him. He's so great. Okay. Next, let's talk about our number 12, if I'm counting right. Yeah, 12. From the venerable Wes Anderson, this is The Phoenician Scheme. And it's another odd-numbered year, so of course we got another pretty great Wes Anderson movie. My biggest praises here might sound like criticisms, in that it's just kind of yet another. It's just Another Wes Anderson movie. Another caper with just all these oodles of hijinks. Another star-studded cast of people lining up, like, literally just kind of queuing up for the consecutive scenes in the movie so they can get a turn doing kind of Wes Anderson style shtick. My mom said that, back when Woody Allen was in his prime, before all the unpleasantness, she felt like Woody Allen movies were becoming a lot like Wes Anderson movies are today, where it's kind of like a mark of legitimacy for various other actors to do a Woody Allen and to get to do that kind of shtick, that kind of writing, that kind of acting. I think there's worse things. Hopefully Wes Anderson does not end up having all these really disgusting skeletons in his closet. It's the same sort of aesthetics and soundtracks and vibe, of all these other Wes Anderson movies. We all know it. It's what we're showing up for. And you can kind of summarize this as like a changelog from like the base Wes Anderson movie. In this one, we added dream sequences, some really awesome kind of heavenscapes. There's a much greater emphasis on globe trotting. They're just flying to all these different exotic locales and meeting critical characters in each one. And maybe a first in a Wes Anderson movie, there's a true like final boss fight. Benedict Cumberbatch in a great turn here, literally just fighting Benicio del Toro. Wait, is it Benicio del Toro? I said that, but then I was like, that doesn't sound right. I'm gonna look it up, because that doesn't actually sound right. No, it is. Okay. I was like, nah, he's in one battle after another. But yes, they literally fight at some duration at the end of the movie, which I thought was a really nice touch. I've never seen Wes Anderson direct something like that before. But we lose out on a frame story, which I think is for the best. I think this movie would have become like maybe a little more grating if there was multiple meta layers to extract our way out of. There's also no sort of home base in this one, which is something I actually really enjoy in a lot of Wes Anderson movies, is the focus on kind of a community or space or whatever. The train on the Darjeeling Limited, or the ship and the Life Aquatic, the hotel in the Grand Budapest Hotel. You know what I'm talking about? That the plot line just kind of like swims in and out of, that's very well established and has a good sense of like a day-to-day life in it. I miss that in this. There is also no substantial kid roles, which is a major deviation from a lot of his recent movies. So yeah, I'd say this overall configuration, these pluses and minuses, not my absolute favorites. And this isn't an ambitious movie for him by any stretch. I think this is another one that he was making more for the fun of it rather than out of some deep burning need to express something, as some of his earlier movies seem to have. It feels like with this success has come a bit of a shell around his rawest parts, his more vulnerable parts. And maybe it's just that he feels like he's kind of like gotten through these issues, personally. He doesn't need to kind of therapeuticize them through film anymore. But now it just kind of feels like he's so kind of masterful in what he's doing. He's got so much control. He's established such a routine that he himself as an individual and that kind of like screaming artistic need is sort of retreating further into the background. But, I've been watching every movie he makes, like, right when they come out since I was 12, since I saw The Life Aquatic in theaters. So I'm just here for all of it. Like, the ups and downs, the goods, the bads, whatever it is, I wanna experience it all. I think this film does give a big glimpse, though, at another potential path for Wes, which is the surreal. What stands out in my mind most about this one are the really surreal elements, the really inexplicable elements. And this has always been a presence in his film. There's always been a touch of like magic realisms. But here it feels a little more pronounced, a little more direct. Like the dream sequences in particular, or just a couple other like really fantastical moments are a bit more spotlighted. Plus all of the religious themes. This is maybe the most in terms of religious feeling that we've seen in his movie. The idea of having a character that is a sincere, true believer, whereas many of his other movies deal with people that are kind of affecting a religiousness, that claim some sort of spirituality, but then are also very cynical about it, or later renege on that. Just the existence of religion as kind of like something real within the confines of the film in a certain way, I think is quite novel to his work. So what I want to see, do a Bible story. How about Wes Anderson's The Book of Job? How about Wes Anderson's Noah's Ark? Huh? Imagine that big symmetrical ark. All the animals, there's two of each of them. It's symmetrical, right down the middle. 1, 2. How about I think the Jesus thing, it's a little heavy, but there's some other fun ones. Who gets eaten by the whale? Jonah? That would be, oh boy. Imagine his interior of the whale set. Oh man. You have a field day. It's so symmetrical. You got the rib cage right down the middle. Yeah, I don't know. I think nobody wants to do big Bible stories very often. The actual legitimate Christian market has that kind of covered, but let's do a fun one. Let's have a little fun Christian satire, but sincere comedy with tragic elements. Wouldn't that be fun? All right, let's move on to number 11. What the hell is this? This is Frog Unlocked, directed by the comedian, podcaster, internet user, mononymously known as Pierce. And this is my curveball. Does this really count? Inclusion of the year. But, you know, it's my list, my rules. So this YouTube recording of a strange comedy special, maybe, counts. And I'm sorry, but it does. Is it a comedy special? At times it is a poetry reading. It's also definitely like performance art. Is it in character? Like, yes, definitely to some extent, but also like no, there's not really like a character beyond just him, but like weirder. Is it sincere? Is it scientific? Basically all of the above. This is a strange lecture on various biological scientific topics, ranging from the makeup of cell components to horizontal gene transfer and evolution, just something really fascinating I didn't know too much about before this, but is actually all over the genetic mapping. Then getting into some kind of more anthropological stuff, like the origins of language and ideographs, the Kiki Boba effect. He provides a very compelling theory for the Kiki Boba effects. The mechanisms of locks and lockpicking, which I guess is maybe more of like physics combined with engineering. And of course, the biology, the inner workings, the organic makeup of many animals, not the least of which is frogs. Intercut with a very weirdly touching John Wilson-esque little mini doc where it's about him on the Brooklyn Bridge, I think, removing love locks, which are those locks people put on with their names written on it, attached to fences and bridges and stuff to signify their eternal love or whatever, but end up just kind of creating a big nuisance for maintenance and other people that need to use that space and any number of things. So he goes around picking those locks. That's his lock picking practice. And some really shockingly powerful Joycean maximalist monologues. There's two that are the main focal points. I think the some of the major thesis statements, if you could call them that, within Frog Unlocked that really kind of anchor the two halves of the performance. One, the prayer he does to all animal kind before dissecting the frog. The other, his closing prayer on love and sex and human connection. It's really actually very lovely. And of course, a complete and quite thorough frog dissection right in the middle of all that. I have literally never, ever seen a performance like this. I am in awe. The kayfabe of it is just indescribable. It's so, like, precise. Like, so much of it is definitely, like, memorized and rehearsed and impeccable. But it's so manic as well. Like, he's just constantly kind of battling his own slides, trying to keep pace with them, getting shocked by what pops up, seeming to, like, forget jokes and then double back. And it's very hard to tell which elements of those were planned and rehearsed and which elements are just, like, genuine flusteredness and exhaustion, and just being leaned into that sense of franticness. There's a lot of, like, really fascinating, very real ideas here that are extracted from the marginalia of scientific theories. And then they're presented right alongside, like, very irreverent jokes, stupid jokes and puns and genuine kookery, things that are surely untrue, that he's just come up for the comedy of it, and madness, and maybe most surprisingly, just these very beautiful sentiments on what life is, what the experience of being alive is about at its most fundamental level. Watching this for the first time, I was pretty baked, not gonna lie. I just saw it posted on Twitter, I think, and threw it on. I felt so disjoint from, like, either the reality of science, but also just kind of, like, baffled and lost within this false reality that I'm not even sure how much of it was being presented sincerely, how much of it I was being tricked by, what was real, what was a joke, what was a joke but maybe he believes it might be real, that maybe I believe now is maybe real. It was the most intense I've ever gotten that feeling since I read Julian Jaynes's seminal work, The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, which presents a lot of very radical theses and ideas about the evolution of consciousness that, again, are, like, so evocative and so interesting that you genuinely kind of, like, lose track of, like, okay, but, like, what do I believe? what do I think is, like, scientifically solid? What am I being convinced of? This whole thing, while also eliciting a ton of laughs, was, like, putting me through that motion again, where I'm just like, oh my god, maybe I didn't understand evolution at all until now. maybe maybe now I understand, like, the origin of species. Crazy. Amazing stuff. And I think that's all a good thing. I think that experience is a good thing. You feel a little bit crazy, but I think that's a good thing. Sometimes it's good to feel a little bit crazy. Yeah. Great piece of art. I don't know what else to call it. It's just a great piece of art. We put it on this list because it's roughly the length of a movie, but is it a movie? I don't know. Alright, let's talk about Sinners. Directed by Ryan Coogler, who got his blank check after making $2 billion Black Panther movies, and spent it wisely, I think. Just the existence of this movie, I think, is very praiseworthy, beyond any quality of what's actually contained within it. Coogler got his blank check movie for making $1 billion from Black Panther. I forgot I put this on the slides, so I just also said it myself. Took a big swing with, a very black-focused, all about black characters, black scene, black music, everything. which already you lose the racist audience, which is like a third of America. It's a period piece as well, which I think loses you another 20% of just like dumbasses. And it's a horror movie, which obviously is kind of making waves within a new kind of audience that just goes to see every single horror movie, but does also limit you from other potential audiences that are a little more squeamish, a little more freaked out, don't want to see something R-rated. So basically, he was aiming for like a pretty narrow sliver on the dartboard, but made a hit. This was a high-budget, super well-produced, attempted crowd-pleaser, blockbuster-type movie that was a genuine certified hit. It is a cinematic and box office achievement, according to the Golden Globes. And as much as I make fun of that category, I think this is maybe the perfect description of it, where you really have to celebrate not just how great a movie it is, but the fact that it was able to succeed in the way it did. It should give hope to us all. And you know, this is far from the best system, where you have to kind of do your time in Disney jail in order to prove yourself worthy of a big check from the producers in order to get people to take a risk on anything else you've got in the tank. But it is what we've got. And sometimes it works. We do sometimes get something that is not a franchise film, which is very exciting. Like any proper blockbuster, this goes all the way from profundity to peril. It's the entire emotional scope. And, you know, we've got our requisite orgy of cathartic gore at the end. Into this kind of double coda bonus finale where twice I thought it was over, and then they kind of sweep me up in all of the action again with one further escalation, one further development. Very good. And, you know, it's not like the most creative or clean orgy of violence I've ever seen. The way it kind of surges into this mode, I almost wish that it didn't. I think, were they not at all concerned about attracting some sort of action movie audience, they definitely didn't need to go this far. But it is provocative. It is really gnarly, and there is a nice sense of them holding nothing back and just going for it 1,000%. The setting of the juke joint culture is really rare, really exciting. I haven't seen too many movies about this time and place. And they make it really dreamy, really idealized. You know, like, they emphasize the grind of it, how hard they had to work to set up this opportunity, the risks of it. There's this kind of running plot line of they're just having this extremely huge, generous, exciting grand opening, and they might not make any money from it. They might not ever be able to stock it as well as this again. This might be their only night that is this big. They really emphasize the messiness of it, all the drama that spills out and around it before even the vampires show up. Just the all of the kind of cultural tensions around this period, and the way that kind of spills into the drama of just trying to keep the whole thing together. But even then, it's like very idealized. Like, those struggles, those grinds, all of them are portrayed as so compelling and so exciting and so virtuous in a way. But I think that's fine. I think it just really adds to the feeling of this being like something enchanted, something that really takes you to another time and place. There's so much world building of the twins' past in Chicago, all the communities that form around them, all the communities that they sample from in order to create the juke joint experience. It's just so enchanting. And of course, you know, this is all about music at its core. That's what everybody is gathered there for, is to hear these wonderful performances that the audience, get to hear so many of these too. It's rejoiced. Again and again, they just rejoice the power of music. Even music that doesn't really fit in with, like, the protagonist's juke joint vibes. You see, like, gospel singing, and you're meant to kind of reflect on the beauty of that, and even the villains, the vampires performing their folk tunes and dances. I don't think we're meant to think like, ugh, lesser music. Ugh, that's why they want to steal the black folks' music because they have nothing of their own. It's like music is this kind of transcendental thing where we're just meant to appreciate everyone's gifts to it. You know, it's everyone is putting in something. It's just some are trying to take out even more. But what resonated with me deepest are a lot of scenes near the start of the movie where they're prepping, where they're getting ready for the grand opening of the jukebox. It reminded me of some of the Steinbeck classics like Cannery Row. Just the level of convenience, you know, that they have to like drive around to all these little stores and gather people, and they kind of just vaguely know where people are going to be, so they have to drive around kind of rounding people up, and they're making all these deals and all these plans, and oh, it just made me giddy. I just it's just so lovely. I don't know. It's just at a perfect little sweet spot of modernity where all of this stuff was possible, and it wasn't even like overwhelmingly hard or unlikely, but it took some doing, you know? It's like a really satisfying day of running errands. I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but I love running some errands, man. And then, of course, the gathering spirits scene where Preacher Boy plays the guitar, and black artists from generations past and into the future are all conjured up, contributing to this strange medley of different genres. And I don't know where the pendulum is at in terms of the critical consensus on this. I remember when it came out, people were like losing their minds over how beautiful the scene is, and then nowadays I see some people calling it like corny and stuff, and I don't know, man. I loved it. That's one of my favorite scenes in any of these movies. I just thought it was so cool. It's just the way the camera just flows around the room, you know? Ah, it's so good. Okay. Let's move on to number 9. This, of course, must be Lav Diaz's Magellan. This is an anti-colonial thesis on Magellan's journey to the Philippines, his famous trip to circumnavigate the world, which he only made it about halfway through, but, you know. Explicit with the lushness and the minimalism and the severity and the slowness of Lav Diaz's style. And, you know, I say slowness, but, like, compared to the rest of his oeuvre, it's actually a quick and breezy affair. And it's in color. My Diaz veteran friend said that he wished it was like a few hours longer. And indeed, in a recent AMA, Lav Diaz said that they shot about 15 hours for this movie. And edited it down to under 3, I think, in partially consideration for awards and stuff. It seems to have worked. This has been getting a lot of critical attention. I think it's made a lot of best of lists, and it's expanded the scope of his audience really, really significantly. But maybe the 15-hour cut will emerge at some point. Nevertheless, despite this being by far his most accessible film, this led to the most walkouts of anything I've seen at TIFF. We were in kind of like an afternoon screening, and I was pretty far up in the back, and I saw maybe like 7 or 8 people walk out of an audience of like 20. Just kind of steadily, 1 or 2 every half hour or so, tapping out. I need off the boat. And when we put this in our festival schedule, you know, knowing Diaz's reputation, seeing the length, which is still a girthy around 3 hours, I was a bit apprehensive. But honestly, also, maybe a little about it, you know? There is something kind of tantalizing about subjecting myself, throwing myself into that journey, into that voyage, right in the middle of so many other movies, in the middle of such busy days. Knowing that I am going to stick it out eventually, I am going to get to the other side of it, and how sweet that would feel to know that I had conquered what might be kind of a difficult movie in the middle of a busy festival schedule. I don't know. I don't know if my friends that actually see a lot of movies in that kind of context, fitting in long movies into the middle of a festival, I don't know if they have that perspective at all. Maybe I sound psychotic. But I think that was part of the appeal for me, and I'm really glad I did it. So, what do we see in this movie? It's the impetus for, the entirety of, and the aftermath of this legendary trip to the Philippines. It operates through this process of funneling, of discarding, of abandoning, to move forward scene after scene. At times, you think that it's going to be kind of like this lovelorn romance, that he pines for his wife while stuck out at sea for months. Sometimes it kind of feels like it's going to be more of like a social issues movie when he's trying to get the funding for this journey and he's going around to the royalty of different countries and trying to appeal to them of the potential profits of not having to go through the established trade routes but forging this new path the long way around. At times, too, it feels like an anthropological study. Like, there's definitely this very documentarian interest in the life of the Filipino people at that time. And, maybe all those things are in the 8-hour cut. But here, so much of that is left behind. He sails away from the aristocracy. The strifes of the journey slough pieces off, making things simpler and smaller and just reducing the number of characters in a very literal way as they die off during the journey. Daily life falls away for the Filipinos in the face of his influence. That documentarian look at their lives is disrupted by his presence, and then things kind of orchestrate around what he's doing and what they're doing in response. His wife fades from his mind deeper and deeper into dreams and imagination, becoming less real, less influential to the events of the plot. It kind of reminds me of Aguirre, The Wrath of God, by Herzog. But here, instead of the Wrath of God, it's kind of like the Wrath of God's absence, in a way. That, Magellan seems to have been genuinely quite religiously motivated as part of his expedition. He genuinely thought he was saving the Filipino people, I think, in some capacity, or at least the movie seems to suggest that. That he wants to save their immortal souls or whatever. That he does feel like he is maybe on a quest from God. But time and time again, it's the cruelty of absence, like Bergman's The Silence, And then he just take L after L after L, and where the hell is God this whole time? Never before has the anguish of this long sea voyage been depicted so agonizingly, so claustrophobically. You really feel like they had it coming, though. Like, the whole time there is also some sort of sick satisfaction, because you're never encouraged, of course, to really empathize with Magellan. You're meant to see him as a colonial bastard, and just this kind of extraction of his suffering throughout the film has like a real kind of like conclusive, definitive, like, that's what you had coming to you. Now let's hit the slow cinema dance. Yeah, so in the aftermath of this movie having its little festival tour, Diaz has become kind of a meme. They've been promoting this movie on like TikTok and stuff with all these really silly behind the scenes clips, and Diaz himself has done all of these interviews where he's just very candid and very funny, and you would think they were promoting like a totally different sort of movie. It's very unclear to me, like, are we on the verge of like mainstream memification? Is slow cinema going to start appearing in the vocabularies of maybe people on the, like, I go see every Christopher Nolan movie and not much else tier of cinephile? I don't know, man. Alas, as I wrote these slides, on the day I wrote these, Béla Tarr passed away, one of the true masters of slow cinema. If there is such a bizarre revival of, I wouldn't even call it a revival. I mean, the genre has just kind of been like slowly there. Some new burst into the mainstream as the result of Magellan. It truly is a tragedy that Béla Tarr would not be there to see it, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to picture that actually happening. I think it's going to get a wide release and people are going to not watch it. But they love Lav Diaz, and we all love Lav Diaz. He's a really fascinating person. Great movie. Okay. Let's talk about number 8. This is Smiling Friend by Hungarian director Ildikó Enyedi. I'm gonna think. Sounds right. This is a triptych of academic tales swirling around the titular silent friend, which is a big tree. It's a ginkgo boba tree that has been growing near a German university on its campus for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's a slow meditation about our relationship with plants and our relationships with one another. Loneliness and unfairness permeate these interpersonal relationships, and then each character in each stage of the story, in each of the 3 anecdotes, finds some joy, some solace, some comfort through botany. But then the light of that academic revelation provides some spark of connection with others, at least some opportunity to form interpersonal bonds over the roots of this botanical connection. It's a deftly woven thesis on the roots of this communication, on what brings people together in the first place, while also answering this question of how is it that plants communicate? Can plants talk to us? Can we hear the voices of plants? It's many times exemplified. It's not, subtle or bizarre or elusive, but it's never explicit either. It really just sort of reveals itself through what you see. And can you believe that Tony Leung has done 2 overseas movies by Western studios? It is this, where he plays a botanical professor who tries to communicate with the big tree in the modern era, becomes very lonely over COVID, eventually gets completely naked and dances around in the rain with the tree. You get to see his wang. I'm not even joking. He hangs full dong. And Shang-Chi, Legend of the 12 Rings. Those are the 2 movies. He co-stars with Léa Seydoux in one and Simu Liu in the other. What is he doing? It's a structure that rejects structure, with arcs that kind of reject arcs. The slices of life that we see in each tale is truly just a slice. There's no real definitive beginning or end to them. There's no real easy way to answer the question, why are we picking up with their story here? Why do we leave it when we leave it? Likewise, there's no consistent switching point. There's no kind of like structural clue as to why we focus on each story in the order that we do. There's no set order either. There's no set pattern to it or set length that we spend with each time. We just sort of switch around at this kind of obscure poetic feeling that at once feels somewhat random and jarring and unexpected, but also seems to carry some sort of poetic weight. There's no ironic linking. There's no kind of like wink wink, hey, don't you see the dramatic irony of this story compared to this story? There's no like specific lessons that like one character learns something that another character ought to know, which I think with these sorts of stories, it's like very tempting to kind of write that sort of stuff in, right? Instead, everything only kind of makes sense from the perspective of the tree, where all of these stories are just a little blip in its centuries-long life. the truest arc, that the one true thing that we can kind of chart across all three stories is that they represent a growing connection to plants. That each character within the story is engaged in some process where they want to understand plants better. And then each story, in its role in time, the modernity expressed is expressed through the advancement of botanical science and the ability to understand that much deeper what's going on with plants. It keeps refining itself, you know, but it's still always insufficient. And you don't really get a sense that the actual human beings in eras of scientific modernity feel like they're really that much closer to the deep mysteries within the thinking of plants. It's like quite abstract, you know. It's it asks you to care about a lot of stuff that I think the average person doesn't care about, e.g. botany. It's quite elusive too, as I said. It rejects a lot of the kind of more formal structuring or theses that you should feel like you should be able to slot it into. And yet I could tell it was resonating very widely with the audience that we saw it with. At times, you know, something puts the plants in danger or something ruins an experiment, and there was like genuine gasps throughout the audience. I swear to God. So it showed there was strong empathy towards plants among those seeing this at TIFF. Mission accomplished. All right, let's talk about number 7. This is It Was Just an Accident, directed by Jafar Panahi. This is a relentlessly stressful, dreadfully ambiguous, and politically very heavy film. Especially right now. This is another one that not only was it topical when it came out, but it became more topical as I wrote these slides, and then even more topical today as an Iranian film around political protesters that were imprisoned because of criticizing the regime. It manages to combine the most guttural parts, the most hit-your-stomach parts of both the Safdie Bros' Good Time and the seminal Beckett play Waiting for Godot. If that sounds like a real good time to you, just go watch it. I think it's available on some streaming services. I don't know. You can go see it. Maybe it's in theaters. Go see it in theaters if you can. If that all sounds at all appealing, I encourage you to not look up anything else. Because there's this really expertly crafted slow burn revelation of like what is happening, what are the characters trying to do, what is this conflict going to be, and I think that ambiguity, that the how long I was stretched before I really truly understood what was happening, was one of the best parts of the movie for me. So let's talk about it a little more and kind of get into some spoilers. Beyond this visceral, real heart-seizing lair, this is a profound movie of self-litigation. It's written as a synthesis of the director's 2 stints himself as a political prisoner. The first one is the source of the trauma and this thirst for vengeance that haunts all of the characters in the movie. And the second is the inspiration for the characters' inner conflicts, the bickering of our main cast, the irreconcilable differences in perspective, the frustration, the feeling of impotence, of being unable to take definitive action, was motivated from the second time he was in prison and he was in Gen Pop. And he heard this squabbling among all of the other political prisoners. They're constantly being tested by themselves, by the situation, by each other, on their revolutionary mettle, but also their humanity, also the accuracy of these pained memories. It feels like Godot isn't going to appear, that the answers aren't going to come, but then, the ending. So this is definitely explicit spoilers. We talked about this in the TIFF wrap-up video, and I think I mentioned it in my Letterboxd review. But at first I was kind of like meh on the ending. I felt like it was sort of a cashing in on the quality of the rest of the film, like using the goodwill they've built up, using the fact that they feel confident that you are compelled and locked in and you care about these characters and stuff. Let's create some catharsis for the director, for other Iranians that have these political opinions, for people that have gone through things like this, and for the viewer, just the general viewer. Let's resolve things. Let's answer some questions. Let's get that catharsis. And it is that, I think. And I think you can say, oh, okay, well, that kind of like weakens the film as a piece of art in service of some kind of like out of the film reasoning or whatever. But now I kind of just appreciate the ending a lot better, just in terms of like its construction, the messaging of it, the purpose of it, truly just within the film. Because basically, it's their mercy that brings them to the truth of the matter, because their prisoner is convinced that they are incapable of killing him no matter what, because they have shown mercy to his wife. He feels confident in revealing the truth of the situation. Then they get their full satisfaction. They humiliate the guy, they threaten him, they make him pee his pants, whatever. They get every piece of satisfaction that they could possibly get from the situation. But then that same mercy makes it a hollow victory, because they don't actually kill him. There is no material change. They got it all out of their system. They got the ghost off their back or whatever, but they have to let the guy go. And now they just live in forever fear. I thought the very final scene where he thinks he hears the squeaking of the prosthetic leg again, and is paranoid that the military captain is gonna seize him, I thought it was a little much, a little cheesy, but like, that is his reward. That is the outcome of everything else that happened in this movie. It's very bleak that they've kind of traded their fantasy of revenge and retribution and finally having an answer, finally being able to look in the face of their tormentor. They've traded that now for just infinite danger, that someday they're going to be thrown back in prison, just like that. It's really quite harrowing, and I don't know. It kind of took me rewatching parts of it and really reflecting on it to see it through that lens. I don't think it's a perfect ending. I think it's the parts where they're really trying to get that kind of catharsis are very self-serving in a way that feels like a little less tight and less well written than the rest of the film, but I do think that construction is very interesting. That just kind of like final irony that by breaking out of the cycle of violence, by proving your moral superiority to your tormentor, you have doomed yourself to like infinite hell. All right, now let's go to number 6. Let me check my Slack messages real quick. Make sure there's nothing urgent. All right. Now let's talk about Left-Handed Girl. I just realized I had my camera covering up her face. There she is. Let's talk about Left-Handed Girl by Shi Ching-so. I wasn't really sure what to make of this going in. And even for like the first 10 or so minutes during it, I wasn't really sure. The blurb suggested, family drama, arcs of conflict into tear-jerking reconciliation. The lineage of the director, though, as Sean Baker's frequent co-writer and collaborator, and Sean Baker himself being signed on as a co-writer for this one and producer, I believe, suggested, less catharsis maybe, and more just like escalating intense stress, as many Sean Baker movies are. Well, the titular child actress, the left-handed girl, suggested something that might be very, very twee, but hopefully not like nauseatingly twee. And it was like kind of all of these things in a way, but in the absolute best and most cohesive ways, especially. Wait, let me check my Slack message again, because somebody keeps saying Slack. Discord. I'm not at work. What the hell am I talking about? And yeah, the child actress is really adorable. And in the post-movie interview, when she came out with the actress that played her older sister and the director, and they answered some questions, she's really funny, really charming. It's incredible how young actresses and actors are able to get that much charisma and that much charm and ability to do public speaking so young. But her naivety and eccentricity, her titular devil's hand, the whole movie is somewhat motivated by her maternal grandfather saying that she shouldn't use her left hand, even though she's left-handed, because that's the devil's hand. And she greatly misunderstands this and starts, like, shoplifting. And, hey, what the hell? What was that? Huh, that was weird. She starts shoplifting and stuff with her left hand and being like, it's the devil's hand. What can I do about it? And because of that, it intrudes on the plot and twists it in all sorts of brilliant directions. It starts becoming more and more consequential. And the plot is indeed stressful. It's full of moments of hopelessness and chaos and resentment and anger. But it never lets you go too long without a reprieve, without some small blessing of some good thing happening, some moment of happiness and comedy and joy, some small blessing or thankful synchronicity. Accumulates, as many of these East Asian family dramas do, in a big banquet scene for the grandmother's 80th birthday or something, where pretty much every character shows up and all sorts of crazy twists and revelations and declarations happen. It weaves together dozens of little plot threads in a really, really satisfying way. But it doesn't feel contrived either. And there is like a major twist that kind of reflects on the entire movie, but it's the rare sort of twist that it doesn't make you feel like, oh, everything I saw was actually like really misleading or like it was confusing up until now. But it just kind of adds depth that a lot of scenes you realize had kind of a secret second layer of meaning. It isn't like what you'd seen before felt confusing or lacking in any way, but it just sort of adds an additional layer of depth to the character writing. Really, truly Kino character writing. That you look back and you're like, oh, that actually like makes even more sense the way they were acting. What I liked most of all, though, is this real strong through line of just daily life and the location of the night market. Despite many turns and events and this movie being pretty action-packed in a way and eventful, there's just this everyday feeling, the everyday of everything, of every life in and around them, just shines through. And my go Johnny, man. He's still gonna be out there, still hawking his seen on TV shit. Even today. He must be out there, even today. God bless. Alright, it's time. Gonna talk about Avatar. What the hell are these people yapping about? Alright, okay, that's fine. Yep, it is time indeed to talk about James Cameron's Avatar 3, Fire and Ash. Yup. It's here. A big blockbuster, $3 billion movie. I don't know if he's gonna make $3 billion. It's this whole petition, get Avatar 3 to $3 billion. I did my part. I took 8 people. Well, I mean, they bought their own tickets, but I took them there. It's a franchise sequel. Made more money than like everything else on this list combined. It's a special effects spectacular. Tons of big action set pieces and scenes and fight scenes and crazy aerial combat. It might as well be a Marvel. And I'm not going to act like I'm above it. I'm not going to be like, oh, this is an exception because I never like that stuff. Now and again, I do enjoy just raw spectacle. Just a thrill ride of a movie, right? And it makes me happy that there's at least one of these AAA movie franchises that I'm like really invested in, that I love this much, that I'm this excited for new installments of. But what really counts is not, the typical spectacle stuff, but how weird and wonderful and different the Avatar series is. This is maybe like the least designed by committee movie of all time. A lot of people were involved in it. A lot of people worked on it. Many, many, many hands made this thing happen. But it is literally just the dreams of Big Jim manifest. So many things in this movie I don't think would survive any typical studio rewrite. If there was anybody at all that had a let's not do that button, they would have been pressing it on like 80% of the decisions in this movie. And there's some choices that I wouldn't make. There's some choices, though, that I think are brilliant, that I love, that I'm so happy he went for. And then there's some choices that I just genuinely would never conceive of in a century. Neither bad nor good necessarily, just like beyond my own limited imagination. But more importantly, it has that singularity of vision. It really does feel like everything, every scene, every atmospheric detail, every plot device, every character trait, every little moment is all in service of some ultimate goal, that there is one autorial genius mind that is looking at every single one of those decisions and judging its effectiveness in the service of some grand dream. So how does this compare to The Way of Water? Because my experience here is I saw the first Avatar in theaters when it came out, and I was pretty mad on it, honestly. Like, I think I fell asleep. I just wasn't really feeling it. I just didn't care that much. And I didn't think of myself as like an Avatar fan in any capacity. But then The Way of Water swept me off my goddamn feet. Moved me to tears every time I see it. I've seen it 3 times now. Every time, moved to tears in its wholeness and its hugeness. My internal nostalgia for the start of the film being banked on by the end of the film. Oh my god, dude, Big Jim was cooking with that one. Whereas here, I feel much more moved and enthused and captivated by my insatiable hunger for more. More everything. Just every scene in this movie I wish was longer. Every sequence I wish had more scenes in it. I wish we just spent longer doing everything that we do in this movie. Because it's just so packed full of just mystifying little moments and glimpses and tastes of so many ideas. Of decades worth of ideas of James Cameron just stewing and calculating this shit and dreaming it up and envisioning it and just reinterpreting an entire world's worth of stuff in Pandora, making something that rich in Pandora, in the cultures of the Na'vi. And you just see like such a quick zoom through all of it. It's the ultimate world building flex, honestly. Things that would be entire movie length worlds in a lesser director, in somebody that didn't have like a million more waiting in the wings. You would spend a whole movie with just like the Sky Tribe, the adventures of the Sky Tribe, but that's just compressed down into like a sequence to be placed alongside just an equally long time spent with like the human civilization, or the Ash Tribe, or all these things that you just get these dizzying glimpses of. It's a really satisfying ending to this one. Way of Water definitely kind of felt like half of one story. And here, I think to its detriment, it really does kind of feel like it's going back and finishing a whole lot of stuff from Way of Water, without, leaving too many new things unfinished either. Definitely feels much more like the ending of like a trilogy, I guess. At the same time, though, I don't know if I've ever craved a movie as much as I crave Avatar 4. Like, not just, ooh, I'm looking forward to that, ooh, I wonder what will happen, but in the same way that I crave like new One Piece chapters or something, that it feels like a physical hunger or thirst, or dreaming of a certain dish or food that I long to eat. Ah, it's so good. It's so good. All right. Now let's talk about. Let's check my messages. Just because my boyfriend is coming over later, and I want to make sure that he doesn't have any questions or whatever. La 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 la. Okay. Boom! Yeah, that's right, everybody. It's Chainsaw Man, the movie Rize Arc. Directed by Tatsuya Yoshihara. Animated by Studio Mappa. Holy crap. If I want spectacle, if Avatar felt insufficiently spectacular, there's really nothing that's topping this year. Goddamn. Highest rated movie of the year on Letterboxd, by the way. Fujimoto fans, we out here. You know, it's not that anime is some sort of like linear competition that we can say, oh, this animation is better than that animation. But in some areas, in some distinct moments, I think this is like a new high watermark. I don't know. I might be crazy. But like explosions. Has there ever been better animated explosions? Like, yeah, you can point to some, maybe some of like Anno's classics in Nausicaa or or in the Daikon or Evangelion or whatever. That guy could draw explosions. Miyazaki, for that measure, when he himself was animating, do a pretty damn mean explosion. A lot of these kind of classics, a lot of these goats of the OVA era as well, draw some explosions. But that is always like one in isolation, you know? In Akira, it's like one big explosion. Here, though, they're just like spammed. This smorgasbord of blasts. Exponential explosions ad infinity in these insane jaw-dropping action sequences. And it in 3D, too. I saw this in 3D. I've never seen anime like this in 3D. It just was so insanely far beyond anything I'd seen in these areas. Eye-popping. Totally eye-popping. But all of this fight scene Sakuga is perfectly balanced by a lot of real character kino. The character acting, of course, off the charts, I think. The animators here understand the characters so well. Understand not just like how they're written, but how they appeal to audiences in a way that, you know, the manga Denji has certain charm and riz that can come through only in manga. So in order to accentuate that in anime, you need to kind of heighten certain things, draw attention to certain things, elaborate on certain mannerisms and gestures. Same with Rize, same with Makita, same with Aji, same with Angel. The characters feel so alive in such a way that it isn't just like, wow, the manga's moving, but like they've truly become anime. And yeah, I think this arc, despite, you know, accumulating in all of these totally deranged, mind-blowing fight sequences, has a lot of normality. This arc is all around Denji, in a way, his final chance at normality, at least in part one. Either the typical high school life that Rize kind of tempts him with, or his life with Makima, seeing like a dozen movies a day every day, which is a normal life. Trust me. That's a better than normal life. These scenes are brought to life with such preciousness, such fragility, in a way that isn't really possible as a weekly series within Jump. And what I mean by that is, in Jump, you can like foreshadow stuff for sure. You can give people a sense of uneasiness that's gonna translate week by week by week. But it's different when you know somebody is sitting down to just watch a movie and they're gonna see the whole thing, and you know they're gonna see the whole thing. You can kind of like leave things unfinished more explicitly, such that these moments of like normality and stuff can have like a real deep uneasiness very deliberately baked into them, because you know that they're going to get the payoff before they leave a review, for lack of a better word. Whereas with weekly manga, if you make it that distressing, it feels like incomplete, you know what I'm saying? And so people are going to like not rate it high, which is bad. You're going to get axed. You're going to get chainsawed. I don't know if this is making any sense, but I was really, really impressed the way they leaned into some of these more kind of like fragmented, incomplete kind of vibes in the opening sequences of the movie. I think in general too, this is one of the more straightforward arcs in Chainsaw Man. The cast of characters relatively limited. The events, timelines, and stuff relatively limited. Concepts are all quite simple. But I think that in turn just kind of makes some of his real eccentricities when it comes to storytelling stand out even more. And here, you know, that can really be manifested because, again, you're just working with the scope of the movie. You don't have to worry about people sampling interpretations of it week by week. This is a really sad story. When by the time you get to the end, I don't think this is spoilers. I think you'll understand this from the opening seconds that this is a sad story. But the way it kind of like dumps you back out after to walk out of the theater, to have that as a complete experience and then just go back to life with it lingering in your memories, is again something that you can really only do in like the movie format that they seized as an opportunity from manga and made more explicit. But yeah, speaking of after, we got season 2 confirmed covering the International Assassins arc. That's very exciting. And I do love this era of adaptation we're in, where they're taking their time, they're not, you know, trying to run the anime year round. They're putting a lot of budget into it, a lot of resources into it. It's great. I definitely prefer it to older eras of manga adaptation, but it sure takes a long fucking time, man. This movie really reminded me of all the stuff that like anime only watchers like don't know, that they're so far away from learning. Like, so many things happen between now and the end of part 1. And that's just part 1. You know, it's gonna take so long for the anime to catch up, man. Just join me. Just read it. Just read the manga, okay? Like, it's not hard. It's in English. If you're watching this video, I assume you know English. You can do it. It's fun. Reading comics is fun. Because, man, yeah, I think the stuff that I'm hyped for now, that's happening in the manga now, if I keep up this pace, it's going to be like 2040 or something deranged. Okay. Now let's get into our top 3. I'm trying to do what Leo's doing. This is, of course, perhaps the biggest awards show titan of the year. Did extremely well at the Golden Globes. Probably will do very well at the Oscars. Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another. It's PTA X Pinchin Round 2 after his adaptation of Inherent Vice, which I enjoyed. I thought was maybe a little unambitious in terms of what novel they tackled and how directly they adapted it. But I enjoyed it enough, and I like Paul Thomas Anderson movies a lot, and Pynchon is my favorite author. So this was easily my most anticipated movie of the year. In anticipation of it, I reread Vineland for the first time in probably around 15 years. I read it for the first time in my early 20s. Just to allow myself to become a pedantic nerd. So I could go, oh, that's different. Oh, well, that's different. Oh, why they didn't put that in? But that wasn't really necessary. It is, in fact, a very, very loose adaptation I would say instead of PTA X Pynchon, it's more PTA's spin on Pynchon. PTA trying to operate in a Pynchonian mode. A chase thriller, but with the sauce of Pynchon, but all of the nouns of Vinland swapped out. And putting it in a much more timely context, setting it in roughly present day and reshaping kind of the titular struggle from DEA agents trying to crack down on drugs and the hippie movement to ICE type agents, immigration enforcers trying to crack down on migrants or just any brown people. It's timely as hell, yet again. It was timely when it came out. It was even more timely when I wrote these slides, and it's terrifyingly timely now as I record this video. And I think, at the very least, this is a big budget, star-studded movie that's attracting a lot of attention, a lot of awards show buzz. It's getting a lot of eyes on it. That very clearly lays out who the villains are. You know what I'm saying? And I think at the very least we should give it some props for that. It's certainly reminding us of how fucking dire our times are. But indeed, I think perhaps growing more abhorrently by the day, the key betrayal of Vineland is brought over into the core conflict of this movie, which is the betrayal against your cause. In Vineland, this is a betrayal that's tangled up in every way as this psychosexual social betrayal of one era conceding to another, the hippie movement turning into yuppies to compress it down into a tiny little nutshell. But in Oba, it manifests a lot more like personal, a lot more tactical. Basically, our character making this betrayal when she's put into a spot where it's cause against family. She either gives up revolutionary information or she puts herself and her family in immediate jeopardy. And I think this is actually like far more counter-revolutionary, this framing of cause against family and just this kind of like kind of archetypal question of, ooh, well, if you had to choose your comrades or your children, what would you choose? I think writing stuff like that is actually kind of inherently counter-revolutionary because there is no answer. Like, I'm not going to be like, and if you're a true leftist, you would say your cause, you would say your comrades every time. But no, it's more like, this is like a false dichotomy that is never going to be presented so cleanly in real life. And it's kind of just like, well, you fucked up at InfoSec if it ended up being this question that's posed to you at gunpoint. And like, I think by kind of seeding this idea that those two things are naturally in conflict, that ultimately you have to choose one, it's like kind of giving yourself an off-ramp into away from like actual dangerous activism or whatever, because you're like, well, why would I go and protest or do something more radical or whatever when if I get in trouble, it's not just me in trouble, but maybe my family would be in danger. Sorry, this is all a tangent. To me, that's the one element of the movie where I'm just like, come on. But whatever. It feels interesting to me because I don't think in a million years, if Paul Thomas Anderson was writing this movie from scratch and he wanted to tell a story about revolutionaries in modern day America or anything like this, any element of it, I don't think this kind of like structural betrayal that motivates the major plot lines would have ever occurred to him. It comes more like smuggled in from the novel. I think that's really fascinating too, and I could go on a big tangent here as well in this kind of like horizontal gene transfer of adaptation where things that are unsuitable for the host of one medium can get like cross-pollinated by adapting another medium and then unlock things that you never would have seen in a film otherwise, you know? But that's an even bigger tangent maybe. Putting all of that aside though, I think this is my favorite movie of the year for just like straight up like movie stuff, you know? Like you're the bones of a movie. The performances, the score, the needle drops, the characters, just seeing the characters, you know, the way sequences are constructed from just really impeccably put together scenes that in turn are put together from all these really interestingly composed shots. The through line of messages and lessons, of setups and payoffs, of the comedic relief, you know, are real primal storytelling shit. And just enough pure erraticism, things that I think in some way he was trying to kind of emulate Pynchon and some of the strangeness, just little moments that really make it stick out in your mind because they feel so disjoint with kind of like the typical flow of it. Just little moments, often comedic, that have become some of the biggest memes of this movie. And it's amazing because it feels like Paul Thomas Anderson, with all of his acclaim, all of his awards, all of his positions and greatest of all time lists, it feels like he's still really hungry to improve on each and every one of these aspects, these fundamental aspects. Like the way he composes shots and scenes in this feels like he watched, like, I don't know, The Master, There Will Be Blood, and was like, no, I can go further. I can think deeper about this. I can come up with even better ones. Well, of course, those already have so many amazing ones. God bless him for that. I think that's all too rare. All right. Now let's talk about number 2. By the way, a lot of these movies, no digital release yet. And so our little screenshot exemplars here, I had to put together from promotional stills and trailers and stuff, which is unfortunate because I really like picking out the screenshots. This one is particularly egregious, but whatever. This is Marty Supreme, directed by Josh Safdie. I was so wrong about Benny's The Smashing Machine in this little brother versus brother horse race of who was going to carry the sauce from their collaborations. I was so wrong. You know, I already got raked over the coals for it. That's a pun. Raked over the coals. Because my boyfriend's name is Cole, and he was right, and I was wrong, and I was lambasted for it. But whatever. The sauce was MIA. I was worried that neither of them might ever make a movie like that again. For some reason, the trailer for Marty Supreme gave me, like, totally the wrong idea. It came across to me as, like, very twee, very boring, very safe. But then, in an early sequence, seeing the sperm fertilize the egg and then the egg turns into the ping pong ball. Oh, man. I knew I was in for a good time. And indeed, my smile never faded for a second after that. Only twisting occasionally into a Fleming response-esque snarl of giddy awe at climaxes. Do you guys ever do that, or am I about to expose myself as like a grade 3 autist? You're just so like pumped that your lips flare up and your eyes widen and you look like a horse that smells food. I felt myself doing that, and I know I sometimes do that when I'm like really locked into a movie. You know, I could go on for days about the Safdie brothers and some other movies on this list, like It Was Just an Accident trigger this in me as well. It's almost like this paradoxical stress response where it's just so intense and so relentless and so stressful that it's like a stress overflow glitch, and I just feel at total peace and tranquility. like somehow I exist in this duality of like suddenly I'm aware that it's a movie and it can't hurt me, but I've also never been more engrossed and never empathized more with the characters and never felt more synced up to Marty's brain. I don't know. I could go on and on trying to like dissect why that works so well for me and like maybe how it relates to like my life and stuff, but whatever. The important thing is that I love it and it's here. Instead, let's take a look at what makes this one so special. What feels like new tech compared to Josh's other works. Checking my Slack real quick. Beep boop. Okay. This is their second period piece. Uncut Gems, of course, very famously a period piece. But this one a lot more distant and feels very, very ambitious. It's packed to the gills with really awesome touches of it being set in the 50s. It's like fully manifested 50s versions of all these types of guys that kind of litter their movies anyways. All these different hustlers and scumbags and lowlifes. Understanding how that type of person manifested themselves in the 50s I found so compelling and so exciting. But they don't commit so hard that they shy away at all from anachronism, which I like. You know, the way that the dialogue is written and stuff is just pure effect. You know, it's just to make the best dialogue possible. There's no kind of like compromising for the responsibility of accuracy. The closeness to World War II, I think, is especially very well empathized. I think that's like really tough to express in a story, right? Writing a story that takes place like 10 years after World War II, you know? Because it's not like everybody would be going around talking about it all the time at that point. And yet it's still way more there than it is for us, right? Like, just the way he cracks jokes about it, but the way that you can tell there are like some deep pains that resonate from it. Just kind of the buzz around the relationships between America and Japan and all these things that you just kind of have to like keep realizing like, oh yeah, no, that was like in fairly recent memory for all of them. You know, Marty, he's pretty awful. But his performance, his persona, this hustler image that he portrays, that he uses all the time, isn't like a facade per se. It's a spectrum. His hustles are a pushing himself through situations, making things happen through who he is, not like a swerve around, subverting himself or tricking himself or becoming something he isn't. And that goes for everyone in the movie. It's not some sort of like binary behind the curtain thing where the self they present and the self they truly are like two diametrically opposed sides, but just this deep mind that the further you go, the more you kind of understand the depths of the character, but it's all continuous. And then there's these moments of like sincerity, of selflessness, of goodness, of genuine emotion and appreciation that glean through Marty in particular, but every character has these moments where you're like, oh, that's what really matters to you. That's what this is all about. And it feels like in this kind of continual mining process, you've caught just out of the corner of your eye a gem that is still mostly encased in ore. And the way that ping pong itself is depicted, which is truly maybe the best example of this kind of like sincerity shining through, that Marty, for all of his ways of trying to make money off of it, for all of his dreams of grandeur, of he's going to be, you know, the star athlete of this emerging sport, he really cares about the game itself. He really cares about being good at it, winning at it. And that comes through so strongly in his performance in these sports scenes. And you know what, man? I'd be down for more sports. The way that the fights in the Smashing Machine were shot as well, I think was one of the high points of that movie, even though a lot of them were just ripped off directly from the documentary. And of course, the way basketball is interwoven into Uncut Gems is very compelling and stuff. But what if they just did like a full top to bottom sports movie, man? I don't know. Could get into it. Could get into it. So, is there still an ingredient missing without Benny? Maybe like a little bit of love. Maybe like, in Uncut Gems and Good Time, and especially Heaven Knows What and stuff. There are some characters that are like more sympathetic than others. There are some characters that are more like victims, I guess, than instigators. Which is maybe something missing here. Here it really is just like shark eat shark, dragon eat dragon in the den. Kevin O'Leary joke, whatever. I don't know. I didn't write anything here. That's odd. What was I gonna put? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Let's move on to number 1. It is, of course, or maybe not, of course. I don't know who all is watching this, but if you don't recognize these two right here, you need to do something about it. And it starts right now. This is Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, directed by Toronto's own Matt Johnson. These are two generational titans of filmmaking. Paul Thomas Anderson, Josh Safdie. Geniuses. The people I'd be putting my chips on if I was in some deranged Polymarket movies future buying scheme. They can't beat Matt Johnson. They can't beat our boy. And yeah, like, okay. Oh, wow. She copped out. Her favorite movie is Marty Supreme, but then she put this at number 1 because it's Toronto Con. It really is a lot of Toronto Con. Yeah, this is the most Toronto movie that a movie can be. And yeah, it's a true celebration of Toronto. Often I see this city as like less than a sum of its parts, I'll admit. There's a lot of stuff I like in Toronto. A lot of amazing restaurants, amazing museums, amazing events, great film scene, great concert scene, good parks, I don't know. There's a lot I love, but it does often feel like less than a sum of its parts, where it's like all of these things are good despite being in Toronto, which is not a great attitude to have. And you could say, yeah, this is just celebrating because I've been such a big fan of Nirvana, the band, for so long, watching the web serials, watching the Viceland show, and just seeing them live on stage at Midnight Madness and TIFF. It was so wonderful. A highlight among highlights of the festival among festivals. The festival of festivals, I mean, is true joy coming through there, of course. We've really come through far, so far. It really is such a triumph. And hopefully this is just a new beginning. It's getting a lot of buzz. They've been doing this like road show, which I think is going really, really well. You're going to get a full theatrical release in February. Go see it. I'm sure it'll be a big success on streaming and stuff as well. Let's get a season 3. Let's get the fucking things they recorded for season 3 from Rogers and air them, okay? Let's do a season 4, why not? I don't know. Let's make Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie 2. And like, putting all this aside, maybe you can just say, oh, you're just rubbing your yellow leg. You gotta pick something weird. You gotta pick something that isn't on the top of everybody else's list, isn't gonna win the Oscars or whatever. I mean, I don't know, maybe. But no, this is truly my favorite. In the sheerest vacuum possible of just, like, what I enjoyed most as a film. This is the funniest, the most mind-blowing, the most compelling. It's the one I'm most eager to rewatch. Takes one of my all-time favorite comedy shows, really, like, maybe top 5 all-time comedy shows, and truly cinemafies it, which is really, really hard to do with a comedy, with something that I think you could call a sitcom, but isn't really quite a sitcom. It's a plot line that is both truly movie-sized, but dimensionally different, too. Perhaps the 4th dimension. It folds inward in a way that is truly novel to me, that I don't think I've ever seen done in any movie, where they incorporate archival footage they had made of themselves 15 years ago that had never been aired before, that isn't publicly available, thus like co-starring alongside their 2008 selves in a way that like just on that kind of like meta level, on that like reinterpretive level, is like really mind-blowing to me, and again just very novel. But I think also just solidifies how brilliant of a performance these characters are, how well this type of humor works, that this type of storytelling works, that they're able to like form that connection with the versions of these characters from almost 20 years ago and make it like sensible. It's truly such a celebration of like their entire comedy careers. But it still carries all of the quirks of the original that I loved. Even at the smallest scale of the web serials, all of the things that made those work so well is present here in the big movie, you know? Integrating random people on the street, just shooting in the middle of Toronto, and whatever happens becomes part of the plot. The what can we get away with copyright flaunting, which makes me worry that the version I end up seeing might actually be quite different in terms of like music usage or other footage usage and stuff like that. And I think bar none, just like the best written kind of awkward bantering dialogue. Matt Johnson has such a gift for just this eclectic rambling character who at once is like very endearing and very likable, but also just strange and selfish and off-putting. And then Jay as this kind of like both bokeh and Sukomi, like both straight manning his responses while having this really affable dumbness to him, that he's always just kind of like bewildered and a step behind Matt, while also being like the only voice of reason that can actually like understand the reality of the situation at times. And just the way they structure these dialogue scenes, that the plot is genuinely moving through them, and they're like making decisions, and they're making their plans, but it's just like riddled with like hilarious little jokes and bits, and nobody does it better. Nobody does it better. Home Movies is great. It's up there. It's up there. Curb Your Enthusiasm, of course, it's up there. You know, it's a high watermark in some categories. But for my money, when it comes to just the awkward bantering kind of dialogue, the realistically awkward dialogue, Except No Substitutes is the best. And it's all got that Canadian comedy charm, you know? As I said, the characters I find really genuinely likable. Like, they're funny, but you also kind of just wish you could hang out with them. They've got that, like, friendliness to them. The feeling of helpfulness and warmth that comes through this depiction of Toronto out on the street is just so inspiring and so nice that everyone is just trying to help. That every time a random person gets involved in the scene, it's because they're like concerned and they want to help. You know, I don't want to lib out too hard. I don't want to downplay Canada's own many flaws. But man, I really like feel so grateful to be a Canadian sometimes. and I think really reflecting on this movie and just like looking at the fucking hell that is the United States right now, I'm like, man, this makes me proud to be Canadian. Maybe proud isn't the right word. Just like incredibly relieved. Alright, that's it. That's my list. It's 15. Yeah, I don't know. I made this little intro as well. Yeah, let's keep watching movies. 2026 is gonna be another banner year. See you then.